Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Classical Music Cadences. In this video, we'll talk about the imperfect authentic cadence, which is the second type of cadence within the authentic group, along with the perfect authentic cadence already discussed in my previous video. Just like the perfect authentic cadence, the imperfect authentic cadence could be easily compared to a period or full stop in the speech, although a less conclusive one, or even to a comma, depending on the context. This means the imperfect authentic cadence is more commonly used to articulate materials within a single musical structure, rather than separating big different musical sections, as we saw with the perfect authentic cadence. Like all the authentic cadences, the imperfect authentic cadence displays a dominant to tonic progression, fifth to first scale degree, where at least one of the chords, the tonic one, is in root position, which means its root note is in the bass. However, in the imperfect authentic cadence, at least one of the criteria for the perfect authentic cadence is missing. As I explained in my previous video regarding perfect authentic cadences, this particular type of cadence must display both chords in root position and also present the tonic on the top voice of the last one. In the imperfect authentic cadence, on the other hand, at least one of these rules is broken. This means that the dominant chord may or may not be in root position, and the last chord may or may not display the tonic on the top voice. This leads to essentially two main types of imperfect authentic cadences. The first one is the closest to the perfect authentic cadence, displaying a bass clausula in the bass, which is the leap motion of a perfect fifth down or a perfect fourth up. Notice that his type of imperfect authentic cadence can't have the tonic on the last chord's top voice, or it would immediately turn into a perfect one. The second type of imperfect authentic cadence displays a different bass motion than the bass clausula, which implies that the dominant chord is not in root position, while the last chord's top voice can have the tonic or not, depending on the circumstances. Bass clausula type. With regard to voice leading, cadential progressions and types of resolutions, imperfect authentic cadences behave in the same way as the perfect authentic cadence, something we already discussed in depth in my previous video, which I strongly suggest watching, if you haven't already, before proceeding forward. One major difference between perfect and imperfect authentic cadences is that the latter group can optionally present the dominant seventh on the first chord's top voice, displaying the so-called alto clausula, since the presence of the tonic as the last chord's top note is no longer mandatory. In the case of the imperfect authentic cadence with a bass clausula in the bass, the last chord's top note will be its third, reached by step motion either from above, like in this example, or from below. Resolutions of imperfect authentic cadences with the fifth of the last chord on top, while possible in theory, are not common in practice, mostly due to their weak melodic value. Out of the different types of imperfect authentic cadences, the bass clausula variant is the most common one. Due to its characteristic bass motion, this type of cadence is closely related to the perfect authentic cadence, and retains part of its conclusive feeling. We could consider it as a weakened version of the perfect authentic cadence, and as such, composers sometimes used it as less conclusive ending for single themes, but in general they avoided it when it came to closing bigger musical structures. Another common use of this type of cadence was as an inner thematic articulation, marking the division between both halves of a single theme. In the next example we can hear both possibilities, a symmetrical opening theme divided in two parts, each of which ends with the bass clausula variant of the imperfect authentic cadence. Notice how imperfect authentic cadences can also be presented through the cadential 6/4 formula, just like a perfect authentic cadence. In this second example, we've got a thematic structure commonly known as period, in which the first half ends with a weak cadence, an imperfect authentic cadence in this case, while the second one is almost an exact repetition that finishes with a perfect authentic cadence instead. Notice the difference between both in terms of conclusive feeling, which allows for a hierarchical use, just like punctuation marks in the speech. Non-base clausula types. The following types of imperfect authentic cadences are considered the weakest ones, and depending on the context, some authors may not even consider them as actual cadences, but rather as part of tonic prolongation techniques, which is a topic we may discuss in depth in another video. In this category we've got two types, the one whose bass line proceeds by descending stepwise motion, which is the tenor clausula, no matter if the last chord's top note is the tonic or not. Notice that, since the dominant chord is in second inversion, the dominant seventh is usually included in these cases. And the one whose bass line proceeds by ascending stepwise motion, which is the discant or soprano clausula, no matter what the last chord's top note is. This concrete example, with the top voice resolving downwards to the last chord's third, is sometimes referred to as the comma, which is self-explanatory regarding its musical function. In the following example, we've got both types of imperfect authentic cadence. Notice how these cadences lack the characteristic conclusive feeling associated with the perfect authentic cadence and the bass clausula imperfect authentic cadence type, which is why I prefer to group them in a separated category, while other authors may dismiss them as non-cadential at all. In general, non-bass clausula imperfect authentic cadences are only used to articulate small structural units within bigger ones, emphasizing continuity over division. Alternative melodic resolutions. So far, we've talked about the importance of the voice leading with regards to bass and top line motion in perfect and imperfect authentic cadences. But at this point you may be asking yourself, what if the melodic line isn't resolved in a normative fashion? Is it still an authentic cadence or not? One of the major exceptions to everything set up to this point, with regard to voice leading in cadences, is what I call the unison bass clausula. This particular type of cadence can be considered as an implicit form of the perfect authentic cadence, and it can be found occasionally in orchestral music or in certain keyboard music passages that emulate an orchestral tutti. As we can see, most of the voices, including the top line, perform the same bass clausula in unison with the bass, leaping a perfect fourth up or a perfect fifth down. There is an obvious expressive factor attached to this type of cadence, meaning composers will reserve it for special climactic passages. It's possible to find other examples of bass clausula on the top voice where the rest of the voices resolve normatively, but they must be regarded with caution as expressive exceptions, normally related to a playful context. Notice how in this example, the line between perfect and imperfect authentic cadence becomes blurry. One last possibly confusing scenario may happen in certain orchestral music contexts, when the main melodic line is not necessarily the highest one. In this concrete case, the whole string section, with the first violin on top, perform a clear perfect authentic cadence, while the first flute, which at certain point is the highest voice, resolves to the tonic chord's third instead of the tonic, hence suggesting an imperfect authentic cadence. The reason why in this particular case I still consider this cadence as a perfect authentic one despite the flute's resolution, is because of the general musical context, and the fact that the first violin is the actual main melodic line at that point. Ambiguous cases like this tend to be exceptional and should be analyzed individually, taking their context into account. This is all for now. Let me know your thoughts on this series, and see you next time.